Greetings to all. This is the Digit Podcast. My name is Laszlo Szemei, Executive Partner of FutureNow, and my godfather co-founder is Zoltán Szekér from Audi and IT Solutions and Sailing Hangar.
Hello, good day everyone.
The aim of Digit Podcast is to allow anyone ungratified with sketchy articles and catchy slogans to familiarize with the key trends of digital transformation and IT solutions. Here we will dive deep into life in tech. Let me start with a hint for history books. Yes, this is the first time when Digit Podcast is published in original English language speaking and not just with subtitles in many languages. So I'm very glad that actually you took us on this opportunity. Not to be confined to the corporate world of Hungarian owners, time to time we look at the international teams in digital projects, and today is one of these days. We are hosting key players of the VR EduMed EU project centered on medtech innovation to support healthcare professionals. Our guests who accepted the invitation, first of all, Zsolt Keresztúri from InnoScart cluster, managing the cluster, Dr. Tamás Budai, Assistant Professor at Széchenyi University and the CTO at the Center for Digital Developments. We will come to that. And Zoltán Kaszai, developer at Széchenyi University. Heartfelt welcome to all of you in our studio.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
So let's start with the university maybe. In your logo, it's the University of Győr, officially Széchenyi University, and you have a very long history in industrial research, especially in the automotive sector, as I hear. But probably today we'll not talk about that part, as the project name is around VR. And I think it's not an overstatement to say that it comes out of a surprise to hear you are a partner in a medtech-focused consortium. Maybe this has to do with the competencies of your long-standing EU project partner InnoScart, or maybe it is because automotive and medical technologies started to converge?
Well, a little bit both, because it's true that the automotive sector and medtech sector has so many things in common. But to just a brief history about the university, we started back in 2002 as a university, and before that it was a college for transportation and telecommunication sciences. So we have a really strong background in telecommunication, and in turn we turned this into a very strong background in ICT. And since the university then started to have other faculties besides those industrial and STEM sciences, like we have a faculty of health. So we are, let's say, moving in the healthcare sector as well. We have a really good and strong relationship with the local hospital, and we are eager to take part and participate in medtech-related projects where we can both use our competence in ICT and in telecommunication, and also the competence in the health sector.
Okay, so that explains the convergence is actually on the university level.
Yes.
What about the relations with InnoScart? Maybe Zsolt, you can add to that.
Yes, actually, you know that InnoScart is a cluster. So just in one sentence, clusters are, let's say, groups of companies, institutions, venture capitalists, research centers, universities from the same area, let's say. So we are a digital cluster. And that is the main reason why InnoScart was selected for the project. We had some projects in the past with Széchenyi University already.
Yeah, we will see how that helps during VR EduMed project. Could you set the stage for the audience about the project itself? So let's say in design thinking terms, what wicked problem are you trying to solve in the project, and what kind of healthcare professionals are the clients?
Well, the project mainly revolves around bringing the modern technology like VR into the medtech sector, and to help people and participants of this field to enrich their education. So the main goal is to employ or use VR equipment and VR applications to enrich the education of healthcare professionals, mainly in the care sector. So we are not focusing on doctors and such, but instead of nurses and caretakers in, for example, elderly care facilities. And we would like to enrich their education with the help of the VR technology. This is the main goal of the project. But I think that along that this project is coming to an end. So we are in the late in the closing part of the project. And during the project, I had the impression that in the meantime we also answered another question that wasn't even on the table when we started, on how to get these two very distinct fields together. How to make a common ground where healthcare professionals and professionals from the IT sector, for example, virtual reality application developers, can have a common ground and a common vocabulary to help them create applications together, which are both high quality applications and also answering the questions that healthcare professionals pose.
Wow, that's some kind of a challenge to take on. Actually, I have some experience with nurses across my elderly relatives who time to time have to be in a hospital, unfortunately, and I realized these nurses can have a very strong personality, and they are very strict about the rules and about what you can ask for and you cannot ask for and so on. So. Maybe I now will turn to Zoltan, who is the developer in the room. So, and also the youngest one among us, fortunately for him. And I think it's worth to know that he also won a special award last year at from the National Media Authority for a scientific research paper. Congratulations on that. It was during the National Scientific Students Conference, or OTDK for the Hungarian listeners. How did this VR project, the VR EduMed project, find you, and what was your personal experience working with the nurses, the users?
So I will start that I applied to the Digital Development Center to do VR and AR development because I always liked playing video games, and developing VR application is kind of developing a video game. So that's how I started making VR applications, and now I'm the AR and VR team leader in the Digital Development Center, and that's how I got this opportunity to work on this project.
And what was, the experience when you started to talk to the nurses, as it was mentioned by Tamás? Did you also notice kind of personality differences between you and them, or between the developer team? Was it easy to understand each other from the start? Were they reluctant, to even think about or just think about VR in their work?
They were really helpful. They send us a lot of information that how things are working in the hospital room. So, and we could use those things to develop this application. So, yes, they were helpful.
That's good. Good to hear, actually.
Yes.
Now, maybe a bit broader perspective on the project itself. So in Digit Podcast, you should know that we have an obsession to sort of take a deep dive all the time. So how did you bump into the opportunity to have such a project? So how was it initiated? Which one was the trigger? Maybe an EU funding call just to do this, or did you have previous research that pointed in this direction? How was the consortium formed? Zsolt, can you start with that?
Yes, of course. As I told, we are a digital cluster of 86 members. Most of the companies are small and medium-sized companies focusing on the digital solutions, so providing the digital solutions. And we have some other companies which are using these digital solutions, and we have some universities as well. So for clusters, visibility is the main issue. And I could say that InnoSCART is visible on international level. That's how we could jump into the project. So we are known. We have been involved in several European projects where digitalization is a main issue, including, let's say, digitalization of plastic value chain, food packaging, creative and cultural industries. So we are not focusing on VR technologies. We have some companies active in this field. And we were invited there because from one side we are a digital cluster, and from the other side we are doing communication activities in some projects, and also in VR EduMed we are the communication leader.
From the university side, we are very eager to strengthen our international presence. Therefore, we are very keen on participating in projects in the EU level and in the Interreg level, as VR EduMed is an Interreg project. And the main motivation behind this specific project was to further enrich our competence in the field of VR, and also to take advantage of our competence in health sciences.
It is a consortium, right? So in Interreg, if someone is not very familiar with that, you basically try to find kind of neighboring or neighbor country companies and universities to tackle something in a regional level. And then I think it should be appropriate to talk about the partners in the consortium, the countries, and the type of organizations you are working with. And when you do that, when you explain it, please also tell about, what is the strength that you bring to the table? Why were you welcome? It should set kind of an example to other aspirant organizations who might want to join the next Interreg project about something else.
Okay, well, the partnership consists of 10 partners from five countries: Austria, the Czech Republic, Germany, Slovakia, and Hungary. We, Innoskart and Széchenyi István University, are the Hungarian partners, and it's a very mixed bag, I can say that, because some organizations are universities, some organizations are professionals in teaching. For example, the Austrian partner is the regional Schulinet for the Hungarian listeners, kind of the same organization for Austria. And some participants have a very strong background in healthcare and teaching healthcare. There is the German university who are teaching healthcare professionals. So they bring this expertise to the table. And from our side, from the university, we are mainly the ICT guys. So we are experts on the field of virtual reality. We do application development, and also we provide help and advise the consortium on the technological part. For example, which kind of HMDs, these VR headsets, should they use for the project, and etc.
Maybe it's interesting also to mention that VR EduMed project is built on an existing project or a former project between the Austrian and the Czech partners. So that's why they wanted to widen the scope of the project, or the scope of the geographical area, and that's why they were actively looking for new partners, and that's one of the reasons we could join this regional project.
It's very interesting. So can you tell a bit more about what was the kind of result of the previous project, and what was the basis you could build on in this new one?
Well, the previous project, it was called VR EduNet, if I'm correct, and it revolved around basically the same base idea on how to use innovative and disruptive technologies in the field of education.
Okay, in general.
Yes, it was a broader scope, and then in this project, it was focused on the care sector and care education.
Mm-hmm. So before we move on, I'm maybe interested in one more thing previously not discussed. Is you probably had some kind of expectations because you already had experience with VR in the university. There are even spin-off companies doing big stuff around this technology. So you had all kinds of use cases previously. So probably you had an expectation, even you as a developer, Zoltán, what the technology is capable of, what we can do with it. And now in this project, as I heard, you are coming to an end. So you probably already have the kind of results around the use case of these nurse area or the activities nurses provide. Did it change during the project? So you had some expectation and you had to do something else because of the realities, or you were right to predict what is necessary and everyone was happy with what was in the plan? I'm asking especially because these projects are multi-year projects, so like 2 years, 3 years, and sometimes it's very hard to predict at the beginning what would be really valuable in the end. So, and you have all these indicators in the project that you need to have so many health professionals, so much content with the results, and so on, so on, so on. So sometimes you need to change just to reach the indicator because the original idea is not taking up enough.
Well, I think I can say that the project, all the results of the project are successful. So what we planned to do and how we planned to do it, it turned out very well. But it's a spot-on question because this is a three-year project. But the preparation, the proposal was written even, I think it started 2 years before, so 5 years ago, basically. And I don't know how you think about it, but it's really hard to predict what technology will do in the next 5 years, even today. But it was the same 5 years ago. But I think that our success lies in the methodology because the project started with the mapping, where we mapped out all the existing VR applications aiming at the same field that we are doing in the project. So for helping care educators or in general education, it was helpful as we mentioned that it is a follow-up project of VR EduNet because they had some previous results where we can we use them as a start. This list of existing applications and solutions. And also we had, I think, a really clear expectation on what the technology can provide for us. But even though we had, I can say, a really healthy discussion and maybe a bit dispute with the healthcare professionals because they were very eager to include solutions like where you need the practice with fine motor skills, for example, doing an IV on a patient. And we, as technology professionals, always told them that the technology is not there yet. There are some solutions that are trying to do the same thing to involve not just your vision and your hearing into this immersion that VR provides currently, but to also help with fine motor skills, but we are not there yet. So we settled on solutions that are mainly around process training, which does not need this kind of interaction.
Mm-hmm. Zoltán, from a technology perspective, maybe you could elaborate about the feature set of the applications that you have created during the project. So what were the main, key features that were asked from the project by these nurses?
I did a lot of accessibility features to the application. For example, a colorblind mode, or we shared the application and for 5 different languages from all the consortium partners.
On one hand, the core technology VR was already there. On the other hand, you couldn't really enhance it with other features because of the other technologies are not ready, like probably haptic or whatever. We can maybe dive into that later. But here in Digit Podcast, we have a tradition. So around halftime, we stop a bit the serious stuff and we go into personal stuff so that the audience can also learn about the people who are actually talking about technology. And this means that we should shine some light on something related to you yourself and something related maybe to the point in time where we are taking this recording. So it's winter time and we are talking about medtech stuff, right? So I thought that I would ask about what do you make of this big trend of well-being in your personal life, not like in the medical world, but in your personal life. And is it something you personally try to accomplish, like try to incorporate in your daily routine and yearly routine this well-being stuff? Or broadly speaking, do you have any practices which might be handy for other professionals out there, how you're trying to preserve your health for your work and family as long as possible?
If we sail on personal waters, let's say, first of all, I would like to mention something which is related to the professional side of the project. So one of my daughters, she's studying nursery actually. She's a high school student. And that's why it was really nice to show her this kind of solutions or practices where, let's say, reanimation doesn't have to be done on living people, let's say. It can be demonstrated also in the virtual technology side. So let's say reanimation of people next to a pool or in a classroom, for example. We had a nice introduction last time in Linz, I think, about a motorbike accident. So I think it's really fascinating for young people to see this kind of new technologies.
And then for you personally, because of
And
of your
for me
daughter.
personally, because I would like her, of course, to be a good nurse in 2 years, let's say.
Yeah, and since you're
when she will finish, so it's a personal side. And as of the well-being, I do play football twice a week still, and I really stick to these timings, to these events. Maybe it's not a big word, but I try to be well via playing football twice a week.
Wow, thanks. Zoltan, maybe?
Well, I trying to eat healthy, taking vitamins, and also going to the gym in the winter. And on the summer, I do kayak daily. So that's how I try to preserve my health.
That's all kinds of useful stuff, actually.
Yes.
And do you consider it kind of a well-being stuff, or it's just normal healthy living?
I would say it's normal health living. I've been kayaking since I was 8 years old, so sport is always in my life. So
Sounds good.
yes.
Thank you.
And also Zoltan has a perfect opportunity because, as you know, there is the city of rivers. So
Yep.
we have
Yes.
rivers where you can do kayaking. On my side, being an engineer and sitting behind a computer and at the desk most of the time, we know that it's not healthy on the long term. So I try to at least do some kind of exercise twice a week. Currently, I'm swimming. So that's how I try to preserve my well-being. But it's really interesting to see as a person keen on technology and interested in all kind of technology that in the past 2 years so many things emerged. New sensors, new applications, all revolving around the general well-being.
Yeah, all the variable stuff you mean.
Yes, all the variables. Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting technology. I think a lot of people are living healthier because of that. I've seen it among my friends even. Me personally, I don't have time to go to the gym. I'm too busy around my PhD and stuff. What I also would say that well-being in general, I think it's just for facility management people to be able to charge more. But apart from that, personally, I start the day with body exercise every day, 10 minutes, sometimes even 20. So that's something I try to do. Coming back to the project itself, so it involves a collaboration among Hungarian, Austrian, Czech, German, and even Slovakian partners. And so you developed certain pilots, certain use cases, like you mentioned, reanimation and stuff. Was there any benefit of the project being set up by 5 different countries? Were there any different perspectives around how we can educate people? What kind of pilots should we have? Any kind of different maybe practices in reanimation, or is totally general across countries? So being, a project of 5 countries, was it any easier or harder than if it was just a Hungarian project? Basically, that's what I mean.
Well, I think on the communication side, there were some difficulties at first, but we overcome those very, very fast. And the really good thing about doing this project in a consortium like this is because in the project, during the project, it came out that even for example, the names of the different medical equipment is different among countries.
Mm-hmm.
The labels on the medication and etc. These are also different. So we had to factor these into the development of the applications, and also the system of the education, the medical education in these countries, sometimes are really similar, but there are some key differences. And one of the outputs of the project is a roadmap document, which aims to help decision makers on how to help healthcare facilities and universities and etc. to incorporate this VR technology into the daily practice. And it was, I think, really beneficial to actually put together all the different viewpoints from different countries. I can say that on the funding side, maybe the German and Austrian partners are really a bit ahead of us. They have better opportunities to, for example, purchase VR headsets. For the Slovakian partner and for us, the funding scheme is a little bit different. So we did an input into the document that we should incorporate more opportunities for hospitals and for healthcare facilities to actually have some kind of funding to purchase the equipment, and for healthcare facilities to take part in the train the trainer sessions or train the trainer program, where educators can come in and can learn how to use this kind of technology in the day-to-day teaching.
Well, that's interesting insight. Anything else from you guys?
Yes, maybe it's also worth mentioning that some of the partners were universities or are universities, University of Győr, Regensburg, and České Budějovice, while there are also some health providers, healthcare institutions, hospitals from Bratislava, Regensburg, and Győr as well. Yeah, so the Győr hospital is not a partner, but it's
formal. It's not the partner of the project,
but
because we have a really good relationship with the hospital as the university, we involve them into the project.
So this was the main line. So solutions developed by the universities of the project are tested by some hospitals from the region.
That brings me to another interesting question. I think whether you see any business opportunity after the project. So basically, as I said, it's 3 years, then it's over. This kind of Interact projects are just like that. But what happens afterwards? One thing I've already heard is this roadmap that is usable by anybody to get a hands-on with VR in our education, to be put very simply. But is there any other business opportunity? Can it be productized somehow? What do you think?
Well, it's a tricky question because all the results of the project has to be public domain because it's an EU funded project. But for example, the resuscitation, the CPR application that we mentioned before, this reanimation help or teaching application, it actually existed before. So they started with an existing application, and they defined a subset of features that will be available for free during and in the after the project closes. And also our application, the Room of Horror, it has a really silly name, but I think we can discuss it later.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
I was going to dive into that one.
The base application should be available for free for every participant and for the public and for other institutions to try out and use. But I think that all the know-how and all the things that we have accumulated and learned during the project can be used and transformed into something that could be monetized.
As a cluster manager, of course, one of our aims is to bring business to our members. We had organized several workshops, conferences during the project where we invited our members. So I am really convinced that some of them, mainly of course those ones who are involved in VR development, can have an added value from this project.
Mm-hmm. And how does it work? So it's public domain, meaning that they can get that code even and then build something on top of that, which will be their product then? Or it's just, the knowledge is public domain, the code is kind of killed or whatever, or it's not even a code? I don't know. I'm asking because I also would like to have some of the audience be attracted to these projects as members. And I want to give them reasons to do that, because I strongly believe that with the international collaboration and with this kind of focused project work, a lot of knowledge and a lot of skills can be developed for even a company. And that's why I would try to attract them to these kind of things, our clusters even.
Well, the source code itself, it could be published, but I think it's not so important. The more important stuff is the actual know-how on how people from the healthcare sector are thinking about these technologies. What are their expectations when they want to use an application? And I think that some of those things are very, very good for companies to look after and to learn from when they want to start, for example, developing a VR application. Because I think that there are some things that are general that came out from the project. as results on what, for example, about the user interface and all the features that must be present in a VR applications for it to be usable actually and for to be attractive for people. And I think this information in itself is very interesting for companies.
Maybe can you tell one or two examples like this about this customer insight that you learned during the project?
For example, healthcare professionals are very keen on having the application in their own native language. It's okay. It shouldn't be done in a very sophisticated way. It is okay if you have some textual help, for example, in the application, which is presented actually in their native language. Because one insight that we learned during the project that students in the healthcare sector, for example, in the Czech Republic, are not all of them are from the Czech Republic, and they have language barriers when they start to learn healthcare. So they have to tackle that issue or that thing in itself. So it is very good to have the application speaking in their native language.
Which means hundreds of languages in that case, or because I've originally, and maybe also some of our listeners, thought that this language translation means into the 5 languages within the project team, but now I start to think about it. Maybe it's broader.
Well, it could be broader. For the project, we had to do it in 5 languages, but as Zoltán mentioned, since we have really good AI-based translation nowadays, actually what we did, we translated all the text that is presented in the application with the help of AI, and then we sent it to the partners for review, because it's so much easier for a native language speaker to review a document than to prepare it or produce it. So yeah, it could be extended easily to other languages as well. For example, to Polish.
Back to the Room of Horror. We should have started with that, by the way. We will have a teaser about it probably. So this Room of Horror is very shocking name. First of all, why it is the name of this, I am very curious. But of course, it was done in the Digital Development Center. And could you explain the pedagogical philosophy sort of behind this? So how does simulating a kind of chaotic, error-prone, stressful environment in VR help actually the nurses to improve their work or just the patient safety or their psychological safety?
Well, when I first heard this name, the Room of Horror, I associated to a room with blood on the walls and etc., and the patient in a very bad condition. As you may associate to a similar thing when you hear something like this. But actually, it's a room of horror for the medical students or the healthcare students, because the German partner are actually using this methodology currently to have the examination of the healthcare students. There is a physical room with physical equipment, prepared in a way that some errors are hidden, some mistakes or some serious errors are hidden in the setting, and the student has to go into the room, and the aim is to find all these mistakes and all these errors, either in procedure or in the physical setting. For example, the patient lying in the wrong setting or something like that, and they are using it as a daily practice. But it was a very good candidate to actually put into VR. Because in virtual reality, we have broader boundaries, let's say it like that. We can simulate different settings, and we can easily prepare different kind of errors and different settings, and we can easily reset the room. You just have to reload the application. When you do it in the physical world, you need like 20 minutes to prepare the room for the next student. So it is a really good candidate for a VR application.
So then it was very efficient.
Yes.
Another good solution is this virtual medicine, which is, let's say, substituting a real body or a skeleton or a plastic body by virtual reality. So you can experiment on virtual reality organs, which is very nice.
Yeah, and it's a really good thing to teach anatomy, because you can easily see what's inside our body. You can easily enable or disable layers, for example, soft tissue or bones or etc. It's much easier because you know that these physical prepared samples that medical students can use to actually study anatomy. These are very expensive and very fragile, so it's really hard to work with them and it's really a big work to actually preserve them. And not many universities has access to this kind of stuff. So it's a really good thing to have a VR application where you can actually experience anatomy. You can load up a model which is a real life size, so a person like you and me, and you can look around, you can skin it, you can disable different layers, and you can see inside what's inside our body.
I remember when I opened with an IT colleague, Laurent, an inspiration room for actually financial services people about all kinds of new technologies. Basically, we wanted to have an augmented reality case to show them. I think it was like 2018, something like that. So very long time ago. Then AR was a real new thing, and we luckily found an American T-shirt company, and we ordered 2 or 3 of these T-shirts with a bone on the front, and they provided a tablet application which we downloaded to our iPad. And if you move the tablet with camera facing the shirt with the bones, then it could analyze that kind of as a QR code or a positioning code. So on the tablet, you saw the organs inside the human body, and like. At that time, I think 4 out of 5 colleagues, they thought it actually sees into the person in front of him. They couldn't do the math that it must be a virtual body inside the application and it's just positioning it. They thought that it's the real one. It was a very fun experience. In the VR, the main catch is about cheating our senses, as I just said, to believe that it's real, although it is virtual. So when we stress this induction in VR, better prepare trainees for real-life emergencies like reanimation in classrooms maybe, or in swimming pools, in all kinds of these situations. How do these immersive scenarios compare to practicing on a real standard dummy body in a real room? And that maybe I would like to have the answer both on the side of the training healthcare professionals, the students, and also on the side of the kind of the official authorities on this, who authorize the education programs, who authorize institutions educating the nurses. Because I fear that some of these authorities might say this is nothing compared to what we have, while in reality, as one person who actually used several of these different VR and AR applications, I strongly believe that sometimes it's even better than the real dummy setup.
Well, yes, it's a really good question, because I think that I personally think, and it's also a result of the project and the result of many years of research before us, that this kind of technology will not replace all the equipment and all the exercises. They are in its current state, as the technology stands, they are more fit to enrich this kind of education. So from the authority side, they can rest easy, because we don't want to replace something in their education. They can still practice and they can do the exam on the same equipment and on the same setup. And I believe that this kind of physical exercise or physical hands-on training is still necessary, because it cannot be replaced with a VR setting. But for different scenarios, for example, this CPR application, where you can easily create a very stressful situation, for example, a setting in the night with a roadside accident, where you have to resuscitate someone in the road during rain, and there are so many things around you that are distracting you from doing the exercise actually. And it is proven by research that these stress levels can be the same when you put put the student in the same physical setting. So it's really good to use VR technology to cheat our senses and increase the stress level during the exercise. But as I mentioned, I think it will not replace these physical exercises, not yet at least.
As you mentioned before, there is a big result from the project which you call the VR handbook, VR EduMed handbook. It is very interesting in many in our audience do projects that include this education part. It's very common. So if this handbook intended to be a technical manual, how to use the application, how to use the trainings, or is it more kind of a strategic document or a blueprint for institutions looking to adopt the VR? And what's your experience about the first readers or first hospital directors or education institution directors. What do they say? What do they like in the document? How they apply this document? And do you plan to distribute this further?
Yes, well, the document when it will be finished, I think until March, it will be available on the project website, and it will be available after the project. And the target audience is both decision makers, healthcare educators, and also medtech companies. I think everyone can learn something interesting from that document, because it summarizes all the results that we made during the project, all the discoveries. For example, statistics on how widely VR technology is adopted in the countries. I think it is a really interesting piece of information. And also there are some practical advice on educators, like I mentioned before, on how to incorporate VR technology into the day-to-day teaching. Also some VR history, this technology is, where it comes from, and the specific steps or the specific description of the different applications. So both for applications that we discovered during the project and we advise the audience to use them, and all the applications that we developed ourselves.
And there is also a kind of feedback forum, a care education forum, which is a platform. So we have been constantly asking for feedback from doctors, professionals, nurses, and all kind of other stakeholders. And I would mention here as well that on the 4th of February, there will be a final event in České Budějovice, which will be a hybrid one. So it will be streamed online. And we have been also looking for interested partners who can follow that event.
I think it's very good advice to anyone preparing such a document like a handbook, that it shouldn't be just technical manual. Yeah, so much knowledge is generated within a project like this that should be available afterwards for the decision makers also, and not just the big directors, as you said, also the practical decision makers who are doing the training day by day of these students. What about the technical difficulties? Maybe we should also shine some light on how easy it was to actually not just develop the application, but also to make it usable.
Yes, we planning to share this application on the Meta App Store. So anyone who wants to can access it. And we also have to maintain it, so doing some patches if necessary.
It must have been an extra task, to comply with all the Google App Store requirements, right? Now we are coming sort of to the end of the discussion, and I was about to ask one more thing, especially from Zoltán, but maybe you also have some experience about, VR has been with us for many years now, so it's nothing new. Everybody saw something in VR, I think. The question is, what happens, in the next few years? What do you expect from the technology, where it will be evolved? Are there any flows of the current versions of these VR immersive environments, so to say, that will be tackled probably in a year or two? So for those who maybe couldn't find a solution or couldn't do something as of now, but should look at it again in a year or two, is there anything that you expect as a development in these environments?
Well, one thing that would be interesting to see, that how this kind of haptic feedback will evolve in the upcoming years, because I think this is a hot topic and so many companies are working on sensors and actuators and gloves and etc. that could be used for this kind of interaction. And also, as we currently see that HMDs, these VR headsets, are getting smaller and smaller, lighter and lighter. So I think that in the upcoming years it would be better to have a long-term session in VR, because currently we can say that for some people it is really difficult, because they have the same motion sickness as you may have on a train, for example. Some people are more susceptible to this, and some are not. I myself are a bit susceptible, so I have to stop using VR after like 15 minutes. so a session could not be long for me. But I think as the technology advances, as new displays come out with higher refresh rates and better resolution and etc., and also the processing power will be better in these headsets. I think that in the upcoming years this will be tackled and it will be a seamless experience even with people who are more sensitive for this kind of thing.
Yeah, we've been waiting for that for a long time now. Zoltan, what's your expectation in the technology environment?
Yeah, well, Tamás mentioned that I think the glass resolution will be much higher, and also the refresh rate will be much higher, so the motion sickness will be reduced, and also the processing power is needed for some applications, for example, for anatomy applications, because rendering these high detail meshes are so resourceful, and that's what I expect.
That's what is coming, right? And maybe just one side question on that. What do you think about these new AR glasses that Ray-Ban and Meta is currently providing since last year? It's a very big trend in technology fan world, but I'm not sure whether it is already useful for something like a VR medicine training.
Yeah. The MetaQuest 3 headset is already an AR and a VR headset, so you can use it as an AR headset and also as a VR headset. So they are developed a lot since. Firstly, I was using the Microsoft HoloLens headset, which was very weak in terms of performance. But using the MetaQuest 3, for example, is much better than was the Microsoft HoloLens in performance. So doing this kind of application on Quest 3, it's much easier.
Yes, we have some projects in the development center, in the digital development center, which revolves around AR, not VR, but we didn't discuss it today. And as Zoltan mentioned, we had some experience with former headsets and the current generation. I personally would be really glad to see a solution which has good enough performance and the use case good enough for everyday use, because we saw some AR use cases in the medical sector. For example, we have a solution where we present DICOM imagery in AR, but the challenge was in the past years with that solution is that the performance of the headsets and the performance of tablets, which provided AR, was not there to actually provide it in a way that users can actually use them. I'm really keen on seeing what Ray-Ban and others can do with these AR integrated glasses in the upcoming years.
But I see on international level that there are several projects from different fields, and AR, VR, XR are still big issues, I would say. Let's say in food packaging, in cultural heritage preservation, in plant innovation. I see several proposals where VR or AR are a huge and very important element of the proposal. So.
Yes, we even have a project proposal which revolves around using AR technology in agriculture.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so probably we will see many new examples in the coming years. We will be better off staying tuned then. Thank you so much for taking the challenge to be the first English-speaking guests as Hungarians in Digit Podcast. Unfortunately, all good things come to an end at some point. This is the point where we need to finish. Zsolt, Tamás and Zoltan, thank you for helping us understand the background of a unique collaborative medtech project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.